For anyone that is thinking that African traditional religions or African American spiritual practices is demonic, I'm here to tell you it's not demonic, baby. And that's what them colonizers want you guys to believe. So, one, I want you guys to know a little bit of history before I get into the African American spiritual practices and just African spiritual practices or religions. So, Christianity actually was in Egypt, which is in Africa, okay? The people of color continent, okay? Anyways, Christianity was predating European arrival, and it began in North Africa, specifically in Egypt. Okay, now I know some of you guys will be like, oh, but they believe in deities, gods, and goddesses and things like that. Yes, they believe in that, but it also was in Egypt too. So I don't want you guys to think that the Europeans had Christianity on lock. They just took stuff and spun it and demonized the other things. Also, Ethiopia is another country that has a long history of Christianity before Europeans arrived and things like that. Now let's talk about root work or hoodoo, okay? This primarily was, the origin of it was from West and Central African spiritual systems. It was blended with indigenous and European influences. Small emphasis on the European influences. But you got to think about it. In slave time, when people were here, and just so you guys know, black people were already here. They weren't just here. Native Americans weren't just here, okay? If you do your lineage, some people will find out they never were taken from Africa. That's a whole nother story. We're not going to unpack that right now. But anyways, when during the slave trade and things like that, because they were taking people from different countries in Africa, etc., dumping them all over the place, a lot of people could not communicate. People of color could not communicate. And in order for them to hold on to something or some practices that was developed in the African American community, okay? So practices include like any type of like earth magic, okay? If you're dealing with any of the elements, any candle work, any ancestral veneration, any protection work, spiritual baths, mojo bags, etc. And the purpose of it is really to empower, healing, justice, love, money drawn, and spiritual defense, okay? Because there are people on this planet that aren't necessarily good all the time. So you have to protect yourself, especially if you are a practitioner. You definitely need to protect yourself. If you have someone that has a lot of spiritual gifts, you need to protect yourself as well, because darkness could see the light just like light could see the light, okay? Yeah, you need to get into that. Now, two, herbalism and conjure healing. So this is passed down through generations. African American herbalism uses plants of both physical and spiritual healing, okay? You don't, because going back to slavery, a lot of African Americans don't really know their roots, and that was all by design with the slave trade, okay? You get people to basically, you uproot them from one continent to another continent, you displace them, you put them in unfamiliar areas, you take away their language, their ability to speak and things of that nature. You demonize their practices, their religion, their deities, their gods, their goddesses, and you use the very weapon, the Bible, against them, which is crazy. Anyways, but a lot of African American households have lost that, you know, and it is very important for you to tap into your roots, find out where you're from. If you have relatives you don't know, reach out to them. I would strongly recommend, now some people don't say do your DNA, but trust me, baby, if you got your blood ever drawn, the government got your DNA. Don't think they fool you, okay? Especially when you're African American. If you know the history between the medical field and African Americans, you already know. Trust me, they got our DNA, okay? They got our DNA. So if you were drawn to, you know, like herbs, you're drawn to plants, you're drawn to things like that, 9 times out of 10, you probably are going to be heading the path of conjure healing and herbalism, okay? Now, the Black church, spirituality, and Christianity, that is a touchy subject when it comes to the African American community, because the Black church has essentially demonized, you know, ATR'S and spiritual practices that is not of Christianity. But when you read the Bible, it contradicts it, okay? when you're in ATRs or you participate in African American spirituality, you know, there's altars in the Bibles, there's crystals in the Bibles, there's sacrifices in the Bibles. And a lot of these practices, they require these things. Some do, some may not. So you take it for what it's worth and find the path that's good for you. If your parents are Christians or your lineage has been Christians for a very long time and you feel like that's not your calling, you are feeling like, you know, you want to join an ATR, you want to, you know, become a root worker, you want to indulge in hoodoo practices and things like that, just do it the right way and do your research. And also, again, this is like the biggest thing that I could tell you guys: have spiritual advisors, okay? And I would suggest, if you are interested in more than one ATR or African American spiritual practice, get a spiritual advisor of those things. You know, I'm actually I'm taking a mix of all kind of things, and I'm trying to decide exactly what do I want to 100% devote myself to. But you create what your spiritual practice is and your connection to God and your connection to your ancestors. I want you guys to know that it isn't always cut and dry for everybody. Some people take a little bits and pieces from, you know, ATRs, African American traditional religions, things of that nature, and they create their own, you know, relationship with their ancestors and God or the Most High, however you want to get into it. Now, ancestral veneration, let's talk about that. This is about honoring like deceased loved ones, okay? Like, I recommend you create an altar. This is giving offerings, storytelling, meditation. This is seen as spiritual guides and protectors. This is common in both hoodoo and African traditional religions. For example, like the Yoruba based systems. Now, some of you guys, you know, spiritual practices could be dreams, you know, and deviation, okay? This is, you know, dealing with, you know, tarot reading. This is, you know, dealing with Ifa readings. This is dreams that are considered messages from the ancestors or the divine. You could use bones, you could use pendulums, you could use especially in hoodoo and traditional religion. I have a pendulum right here. Yeah, so I'll be tapping into that as well. Now, some ATRs, if you guys don't know what ATRs are, you know, you have the Yoruba slash Santeria. This is Orisha veneration, like Oshun, Yemaya, Ogun. I have an Ogun bracelet here. I'm not 100% committed, but I have built my relationship with Ogun, also Oshun and Yemaya. You know, you could do those things without necessarily being crowned or your hands and Ifa, but just make sure your intentions are where they need to be, because these orishas, they can be very vengeful if you you know, disrespect them and things like that. But before you commit, you can build a relationship with them, and I got that blessing from a Babalao. So anyways, just so you guys know that. And Ogun is very present in my house, for real. He is very present. He is very present when I go out in the forest, if you know anything about Ogun. But that's not the only Orisha that frequents me in my space and things like that. So Ifa, this is a deviation based path with deep roots in Yoruba cosmetology. I have had Ifa readings. I would recommend them, especially if you are drawn to like orishas and things like that. They could really give you some valuable information. You could also too, like music and movement, that is also very spiritual. This is a spiritual expression, storytelling, and oral traditions, okay? And just personal spirituality. Some people have gifts, some people are intuitive, some people have the senses, you know, clairvoyant, clairaudience, things of that nature, okay? But listen, African American traditions and religions are not demonic, and don't let, you know, colonizers continue to keep you off of your path and connecting with your roots. It's not demonic, okay? I'm telling you, it's not demonic.